Welcome to the Jonathan Kinloch Show. We're broadcasting here at Detroit Cheesecake Bistro in the historic Greek town. And we're going to be promoting from time to time local businesses in our area to make you become familiar with these establishments, not just restaurants, but as a number of different businesses that are playing an important role in the retooling and the rebirth here in the city of Detroit. Well, as we talk about the importance of economic development, job creation, we're going to talk today about an important tool or an underutilized tool that's available to the public officials here in southeastern Michigan, as well as the entire state, right here locally in Wayne County. When we come back, we're going to have a conversation with John Jamian, the Executive Director of the Detroit Wayne County Port Authority. Welcome back to the Jonathan Kinloch Show. From the moment that the French settlers founded Detroit, they understood the importance of its waterways. Here on today's show, we have John Jamian, the Executive Director of the Detroit Wayne County Port Authority. He is trying to lead an initiative to call for the policymakers and the politicians around town to understand the importance of the Wayne County Port Authority. And I want to welcome John Jamian to the show.
Well, thank you very much. I'm glad to be here, and I'm really excited about the fact that you're interested and want to help us communicate our message, because we think we have an important message.
Well, John, I travel the world, and I understand the importance of ports. I had a family member who worked for the Charleston ports for a number of years. I spent a lot of time on the East Coast. And as we are hearing the need for economic development and a number of discussions that are taking place as it relates to transportation issues here, in those communities, the Port Authority have a role in those transportation and major public work projects. We don't see that here, John Jamian. What's going on here?
Well, I think, John, we see a lot of paranoia by other economic development organizations in town that look at us as a threat, when in fact, we're not a threat. Our job is to help develop the Port of Detroit and to also help with economic development around Detroit. Now, our first priority is the port, and that's where we're going to focus our energies. But you got it right. Since 1701, when the French came here, they recognized the importance and strategic value of this waterway. And here we are today in 2012, about to turn the corner, and we're a major supplier to the steel industry in Detroit, to steel companies throughout the state of Michigan, and also to the automotive industry.
Well, you know, sometimes as I have these conversations and interviews, I forget a lot of folks don't know about or are not that familiar with a number of these governmental authorities. The Wayne County Port Authority is a governmental unit that was established back in, I believe, 1978 by former Mayor Coleman Young, as well as the late Henry Ford II, because they understood the importance of the waterways and bringing together the collective minds to develop a plan around that. Can you explain what the Wayne County Port Authority is? And then we're going to have a conversation about some of the changes that's being looked into down over there in Lansing.
Sure. Well, I'll tell you, the Detroit Wayne County Port Authority, our mission is to really help promote and market the Port of Detroit. That means there are 31 companies that make up the Port of Detroit itself, big companies, whether it's Severstal Steel, Marine Pollution Control, Michigan Marine, Nicholson Terminals. I can go on and on. But our job is to help market for them. But also we play a significant role here in Detroit and in Wayne County in bringing federal grant dollars to this region. And, you know, an interesting fact, is that just last year alone, we brought in $1.5 million worth of federal grants to Wayne County and Detroit. And for their investment of $236,000 to us, they had $1.5 million in return for Homeland Security and Brownfield Development grants. People don't know this, but we are the fiduciary agent for the Port Homeland Security Grant Program here in Detroit. We also operate the EPA Revolving Loan Fund Program for brownfield site investigations. We also operate the largest foreign trade zone in the United States. We have the largest cache of aluminum bars here at our port and our bonded warehouses in the United States. So we're doing all of these things at the port, plus we host, and this is what I'm all excited about, we brought cruise ships back. Who would have ever thought that our new dock downtown Detroit would play a significant role in having cruise ships visit us once a week?
Why hadn't they docked at the Port of Detroit in the past?
Well, in 1967, the cruise ship industry in the Great Lakes kind of died, and it was because of really harsh Coast Guard regulations. And at that time, many of the cruise ships had a lot of wood in them, and they were fire hazards. And so between 1967 and 1998, we really didn't have cruise ships. And then it started out with us negotiating with a German cruise ship company to bring this German cruise ship from Germany with German passengers all the way across the ocean to Detroit and into the Great Lakes. And then from there, through the great help of Senator Carl Levin, we were able to develop this brand new dock downtown. And to this day, last year and this coming summer season, we're going to have 12 cruise ship visits during the summer, plus numerous dinner ships, entertainment ships, Navy ships, dining ships. It's a busy place.
So how does that benefit the local businesses? Because often on these cruises, they're pretty much self-contained, and they try to keep that money on those cruise ships. There's some dollars that's spent once they dock, but what does that represent?
I'll tell you, what makes us unique is the fact that we're the point where the cruises start and we're the point where the cruises end. So the passengers come in the night before, they spend the night at our hotels in Detroit. They have a whole day to tour Detroit. I personally have seen them, and they've asked me, where's the DIA? How do I get to the DIA? How do I get to Greektown? I want to see General Motors, world headquarters. I want to go to the Henry Ford Museum. So, in fact, they are spending a lot of dollars here in this region. It's pretty significant.
Well, the 1978 enabling legislation, which brought about the Port Authority, Detroit Wayne County Port Authority, there's some talk in Lansing, bills under consideration to modify or empower the authority. When we come back, we're going to continue our discussion with John Jamian, the Executive Director of the Detroit Wayne County Port Authority. Welcome back to the Jonathan Kinloch Show here at the newly renovated and newly opened Detroit Cheesecake Bistro. And they sell some excellent entrees. And this is my first time being here, and I invite all of you all to come and taste some of the great dishes. I'm looking over here at this breakfast that's over to my right, and I'll deal with that after the show. But we're having a very important conversation with John Jamian about the economic development here in southeastern Michigan, but more so about a tool that is so underutilized that there is talk in Lansing to modify the original law creating the Wayne County Port Authority to better equip the authority to be able to compete with other port authorities in our area. John Jamian, we were talking briefly about the history of the Port Authority in the last segment. I want to talk now about the changes that are being sought in Lansing to strengthen and to equip the Detroit Wayne County Port Authority with the tools to compete against or compete with local authorities in our region.
Well, the key word is to compete with local port authorities in the Great Lakes. Toledo, which is just down the river very close to Detroit, is probably 10 times our size, and yet the city's much smaller. This particular legislation is to update a 1978 law that put us together. If you think about it, Jonathan, we have not changed our law since we were assembled in '78. And back then, the law specifically defined what types of projects we could do, like build ice houses. We don't have ice houses anymore. We're past that stage. So what we did was we retooled the legislation to allow us to, or better equip us, to have more projects, have a greater variety of projects that we can bond with a focus at the port on transportation. And so this piece of legislation is critically important to our future for a couple of reasons. Number one, it makes us competitive with Toledo and Cleveland. Their governor, their county executive, their mayors, they all support their ports very strongly as an economic development tool. And we want to compete with them because they're taking our business. And second of all, if you look at southwest Detroit along the river, there's no economic development down there. We want to be able to help create economic development. You can go up the river, down the river, you can go to northwest Detroit, you can go all over the place. And we have a lot of exciting things happening right downtown, such as this restaurant. But if you go a few miles in any direction, we need more economic development.
But I always say that in positions such as yours, director of planning departments, you have to have dreamers in these positions because very often over these past 30 some odd years, you haven't had an executive director that have been very visible pushing and calling for certain changes. For too often, many individuals get into these positions and basically look to them as retirement positions. You're actually out here. You're trying to push to bring about change in the original law to allow you to actually operate similar to port authorities that many of us recognize. Boston's Port Authority. We talk about New York Port Authority. And so let's also talk about some of the initiatives that could be brought about because of this legislation that will directly impact on the local economy.
Well, you're right. I've toured around the country, seen all the ports and seen what they can do. I'm a dreamer. You have to step out, and sometimes you become a target when you do that. And I'm not afraid to be a target because I am a dreamer. I believe in this city. I was born and raised in this city, and I know that our Port Authority can be a substantial transportation, economic development related tool. Some of the projects we're working on down the river, down by the Rouge River, we're working on building new seawalls. We've worked on Belle Isle. We've worked on the Detroit River itself. We're very aggressive in making sure that we get dredging funds to keep our water channels deep because there's been a drought. Water levels are down. We're working on some bonding development for a major company here in Detroit.
Let's talk about the ability for the Port Authority to use its bonding capacity to benefit and to strengthen financial options for local businesses, or businesses, I guess, that have a connection with the Port Authority.
Yeah, I think a really important point is we have unlimited bonding capabilities, and here's the most important point. Any bond that we put out, it's called non-recourse, which means that the taxpayer will never be held accountable if there's a default on any of our bonds. Our bonds are structured in such a fashion that if there was a default, it's because of the company, and the bankruptcy judge would take care of remedying that. Our bonds are structured in such a fashion so that it's built on the revenue of the project itself. We built the new GM, we financed the new GM Beaubien Place parking garage with parking spaces and retail space. It's a $41 million issuance. It went flawlessly, and not only did it work good, but it allowed us to make a few fees. I think that when we talk about bonding, other people say, well, we can issue revenue bonds, we can do the same things, but no one else has done it. We've done it. Right. And we're willing to do it.
So let me ask you, is this bonding capacity that you all have just limited to projects in and around the Port Authority, or can it, if the project warrants, can it go beyond your service area?
Well, today as we speak, we're still operating off the 1978 law, which pretty much confines us to the actual port district on the water. And I make the case with the new legislation that we need to have the ability to go off the water. It's not because we want to build or bond new hotels and apartment buildings and offices downtown Detroit.
You just have any option.
We want to have the option because there could be a transportation logistics center at 8 Mile and Telegraph that we might have to bond. It's transportation related, but it may not be on the river.
But let's talk about how other port authorities actually are involved in these type of projects, because a lot of folks are not familiar with the role of a port authority. Let's bring them up to date as relates to some projects that are similar that they may be familiar with in other major cities.
Well, let's talk about New York City. New York City, you know, they have a port authority with New Jersey, and they just built the brand new Freedom Tower.
And not to mention that they used to
own the Twin Towers. And they own a subway. They run the subways, the buses, the airports. Their port authority does everything. Then, if we go to the Great Lakes, John, we look at Cleveland. Their port authority bonded the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the Cleveland Browns Stadium, and so they did other projects and helped the city. The difference between those cities and ours, their political leaders all get together and say, how do we make something better so that we can build this city even larger and better? That's what we want to do right here in Detroit.
And when we come back, we're going to talk about a major issue that continues to stick with us, and that is the issue of transportation. When we come back, we'll continue our discussion here on the Jonathan Kinloch Show with John Jamian, Executive Director of the Detroit Wayne County Port Authority. Welcome back to the Jonathan Kinloch Show. We're having a conversation with the Executive Director of the Detroit Wayne County Port Authority, and we have been talking about the importance of port authorities around the country. What I want to talk about now is the important role transportation is to any major metropolis. But unfortunately, here in the state of Michigan, especially in southeastern Michigan, we seem to be locked and confused on how to put together a comprehensive regional transportation plan that draws in businesses, that also assists with residents in the area being able to have a meaningful transportation option. The Port Authority, as we mentioned in the last segment, in New York especially, and in other communities, play a very important role in their transportation or public transportation options. Why isn't our leaders in Lansing talking about public transportation alongside of the Wayne County Port Authority, since you all are basically transportation creature? That's what you do.
That's what we do, and my saying is, why reinvent the wheel? It seems like every other day we're talking about building a new authority to do a specific job here in Detroit. We have a transportation authority. Secretary of Transportation Ray LaHood has come down to our place 2 or 3 times to visit us. You know, we have a state-of-the-art facility down on the river. We know how to do it. We talk about putting a bus line up Woodward and creating a new transportation authority for that. We talk about creating a new transportation authority for this. We talk about a Cobo Hall authority.
Right, absolutely.
And at some point in time, we're going to have 20 authorities here in town. The fact of the matter is, you have a port authority that knows how to do it. We've done it. We can do it. And just like every other city, like you said, especially in New York, they've put it together. Why don't we follow their model and save some money? Why don't we save the taxpayers some money, and instead of creating new authorities, use the existing authority that we have? That's why we're here. We've studied it, we understand it, and we know how to do it.
Well, I will hope that at some point the leaders in the area would get the point of, instead of just, like you said, creating all of these various different authorities for major public work projects, would actually utilize the talent and utilize the expertise over there at the Port Authority. Before we go, I want you briefly to leave our listeners with your background and also your vision for the new Wayne County Port Authority if this legislation is brought forward.
Well, my background is that I ran the Detroit Wayne County Port Authority from 1998 to 2001. I went to Washington, D.C. I ran the United States Maritime Administration. I was in charge of all the ports and shipping in the entire country. From there, I was recruited back here to the Port of Detroit, which I came because it was my hometown. Brand new building. So my background is transportation and ports, but secondly, as far as my vision for the future, I look at more cruise ships, I look at more tourists, I look at building out the Detroit River and creating not only more new housing projects, but helping our industry that's here right now. Our industry, our automobile industry, our manufacturing industry, that's what makes this region strong. We need to embrace it, not change it. We want to be a part of that. We want to help. We can help, and we will help.
Well, John Jamian, I want to thank you for coming on the show. This is a very important topic. The tools that are available for our policymakers and for businesses is something that we really need to put out there in order to inform individuals that you exist and you are an option, because too often we hear that we don't have the ability or the capacity to bring about some real economic development and boom here. So I want to thank you for coming on the show, and I will definitely be in touch with you in the near future.
We encourage you and all of our listeners to come on down and visit us at our Newport building on Atwater and Bates, right on the river.
Okay, what's the, well, I guess right when you get in the river, you don't need too much of an address.
We're right next door to the Renaissance Center, General Motors World Headquarters.
Okay, I'm going to take you up on that offer. I know of no safe repository of the ultimate power of society but the people, and if we think them not enlightened enough, the remedy is not to take power from them, but to inform them by education. That's what I hope we do here each week on the Jonathan Kinloch Show, educate you and inform you on all of these issues around here. Until next week, have a great week.